Welcome to Spicy Toast Gaming and our Annie Guide for Path of Champions. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. Let's start with an overview of the champion with a pro, con, and mixed list. The mixed is because some of the aspects can be either a positive or a negative on your own personal perspective. So let's start with the pros. So the first is the high damage. Annie is able to do a large amount of damage both to the Nexus and enemy units, and often can destroy the enemy the moment they are played. Another positive is that she is very versatile. As a champion, with her being one cost, you can do a lot of different things with her. You can build her in many different ways, and you can even play her during the matches in a large variety of ways. She's also incredibly consistent. You can take her into the toughest matches in the game and consistently win every single time, no matter what powers you come across. She also is a very low investment champion, as in you don't need to max her out for star powers, you don't need to level her all the way. She can normally hold her own very easily, especially if you just get to the rank 2 star power, which is usually fairly easy. You don't even need to give her a lot of champion levels or anything like that. She's pretty good right out of the gate. And lastly, she is very unique. None of the other champions really have a playstyle quite like her. And then with her unique star powers, which we'll get into later, she's able to play in a way that is just very different than everyone else. Alright, on to the mixed category. The first one is that her entire kit is based around spells and skills. And skills are what your cards, what they can actually do themselves. So this gives her that very unique playstyle, but if you're not wanting a champion that's based around that, that would be a negative. So just be aware that when you're going to play Annie, her whole kit is based around spells and skills. The next in the mixed is that she's a 1-mana champion. Now while that's great in the fact that you can play her round 1, and you can have her on the board almost the entire time, it also means that she is incredibly squishy. She's very easy to kill, she only has 2 health, and so pretty much any spell can take her out, and if anyone is able to give her vulnerable or challenge her, she will likely die. So if you don't want to worry about babysitting your champion, then she might not be the champion for you. Next, she is rather complex. Now, not the most complex champion in the game, but she definitely does take a bit more thought and attention than many of the other builds. So if you're wanting to play someone where you'll have to actually think a bit more in the game, that can be a positive. But if you just wanted to have a very chilled, relaxed experience and not have to overly exert yourself, then she might not be the champion for you. Next, she is very combo based. So to get the best results with her, you will have to spend some time setting up and then delivering your combo to wipe the enemy board or destroy their Nexus. So again, that goes into the complexity aspect. So if you don't really want to play a combo based champion, then you might want to look somewhere else, but if that sounds fun to you, then that's definitely a positive. Now for Annie, there's only one real con that I could think of, and that is that the deck is somewhat reliant on Annie. Now she's not the worst, there's definitely other champions that have this much worse than her, such as like Yasuo or Bard, but it is definitely going to hurt you a lot if you aren't able to draw or protect Annie. That's really only pure negative that I could come across with her. Alright, next we will jump into some of the powers for her. Not the star powers, these are the powers you want to be able to find when you're going out in a run with Annie. So first, you want to find one of these 2 powers immediately. Now the Spell Slinger is definitely better, but Wild Inspiration can definitely be very helpful to you. This is just going to help when you make those guiles from your level 2 star powers. They're going to be free, and then with the next power we're about to look at, this will also make that free. But this is definitely one of the powers you want to have first. Now, you don't necessarily need both of them. If you can get Spell Slinger, then you definitely don't need to grab Wild Inspiration. But you want to get one of these first if possible. Alright, the last power that I feel is really necessary or very good with Annie is this Bouncing Blades. So what this does is round start, like it says, it creates a fleeting Blade's Edge in hand. Now, a Blade's Edge is a 1 mana, deal 1 damage to anything, but with Annie's powers, that's going to be increased damage, so you can get that up to dealing 4 or 5 damage every single turn. And then with the last 2 powers that we talked about, it will be reduced in cost to 0. So essentially, for every one of these powers you can get, and you can get multiple, it will create a 0 cost, deal 4 to anything on round start. And since you can get multiple of these, it can end up where every single round you're getting a 0 cost stun anything and multiple 0 cost deal 4 to anything. And so that really just lets Annie completely dominate the board and kill any opponents that her opponent plays, any cards, and then also able to deal a massive amount of damage to the enemy nexus every single turn just from these powers. So of course there's many other powers that can be very good with Annie, and I definitely encourage you to experiment, but these couple of powers are definitely ones that stand out and ones that you want to try to look for when you're first starting your run or going through your run. Alright, let's jump into game and take a look at Annie's star powers as well as the relics to equip on her. Alright, so the star powers for Annie, the rank 1 star power is Pyromania, and that increases your spells and skills damage by 1. The rank 2, the Playful Trick, gives you +1 starting mana, so you start at 2 mana instead of 1, and then round start creates that Fleeting Guile in hand, which we discussed earlier. So by default it's a 1 mana stun an enemy, but with those powers I suggested earlier, this would be a 0 cost when it's created. And then the rank 3 just increases your Pyromania by 1, so it makes your spells and skills now deal 2 extra damage. And this is happening whether or not Annie's on the board, so just any spells you do or any skills your cards play, those are all going to be doing 2 extra damage. And that ties into the Blade's Edge that we talked about earlier, that power that creates a 1 cost deal 1 to anything. Because of this, it'll now be dealing 3 to anything, and with those powers that we talked about, it'll be costing nothing every round. So that is the star powers for Annie. Let's move on to the relics and how I suggest that we actually build her. Now, there's many different ways you can build each champion. I definitely recommend that you experiment, but these are the ones that I find work the best on her. So for commons first, Banshee's Veil, in my opinion, is a must since she is so weak. Any spell will pretty much kill her, and so giving her spell shield so that she can stay on the board more safely is definitely, I think, a must. One thing that I always run on her. I think, yeah, I even have a rare relic available, but I'm still going to use that Banshee's Veil. The other common that I think is very good for Annie is the Lost Chapter. So when she's summoned, she refills your spell mana, just letting you be able to play your spells more freely, especially if you weren't able to get one of these star powers or one of the normal powers that I mentioned earlier. Next, Archangel Staff I think is very good. Since you can play Annie on turn 1, this essentially is just giving you spell mana every single round other than turn 1, which just gives you so much freedom and definitely helps out you just be able to play whatever you want to play and never really having to worry about your mana. The next one that I think is very good is the Ludin's Tempest, and this is just increasing all of your spells and skills by 1, so that's essentially doing the exact same thing as her star powers. Now this one does require Annie to be on the board, so you always want to have her out because that's just going to be further increasing all of the damage of your skills and spells. So like that Blade's Edge that we were talking about before, now instead of doing 3 damage, we'll be doing 4. And that just carries over to all of your spells and abilities, which really just increases the amount of damage she can do and further just enhances what you're already trying to do with Annie. So that is the relics, and I think that's Annie pretty much fully covered. I will be doing a playthrough of Annie versus Galio, so definitely pay attention to that. But thank you for watching, and now kick it over to the outro page. Thank you so much for watching the video. This is my first video on YouTube, so please like and subscribe, as the support will be greatly appreciated. I will be releasing a playthrough with Annie, going through Annie versus Galio, which is the most difficult encounter in the game at the moment. I'll be posting that likely tomorrow, and I'll try to link that in the description down below. So if you're interested, please go and look at that and watch that if you want to see how to actually play Annie in-game and how you can easily beat the toughest encounters with her. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great day.